I hope you've had a wonderful conference so far. I'm Zan. I'm a senior developer at Care Planner, and I craft APIs using Symfony, caffeine, and swear words. I'll be around later at the social to answer any questions, but if anyone's not comfortable asking questions in public, my DMs are open on Twitter, which is pretty easy to remember. Every single one of us belongs to a community in the town or city that we live in. That could be neighbors, shops, schools, pubs, social clubs. It could be your local scuba diving team. I'm assuming a lot of people here are going to meetups, or even if it's just seeing friends. Every single one of them gives a sense of community. Unfortunately, the dictionary definition of that fails to comprehend the full sense of what a community is. Every great community in the world has, at its core, 3 pillars. The first is commonality. A shared interest or attributes is the building blocks and foundations of any community. You wouldn't be friends with someone who you have nothing in common with. The next is communication. Communication through deliberate and conscious hard work is what you use to build upon the foundations of commonality. The result of that, you'll see around you the fact that you're at a conference dedicated to Symfony. The next important thing, probably the most important, is human connection. Commonality and communication combine with each other, allowing people to connect in more ways than just talking or emails or making pull requests. Human connection brings value to the community in complex ways that cannot be explained by the individual parts. For example, if I showed you this picture, it wouldn't really mean much to anyone. But human connection, it takes something of little value, such as this photo, and allows 122,000 people to form a community on a Reddit dedicated to bread stapled to trees. Check it out, it's awesome. Human connection is what causes the weird and the wonderful to happen. This is something someone said today. Symfony is not really a framework anymore. Symfony is a community. Symfony is an ecosystem. We are Symfony. And that was about Tobias's talk in this room earlier this morning. Every community is nothing without the communication and connection of its members. And this is something that Symfony got right. It's one that provides knowledge and resources to anyone that's interested. It's one full of members that are willing to give inspiration and advice and support to anyone that's willing to listen. So as we explore the Symfony community, probably the best place is to just symfony.com. It states that there's around 600,000 developers worldwide across 120 countries. I think it's probably more than that, but I can't prove it. This is reflected in some statistics around the internet. There are 10,000 likes on Facebook for Symfony. On GitHub, it has 18,500 stars. There are around 7,000 people subscribed to the general and support channels on Slack, which goes up or down by about 1,000 quite regularly, so it's a very active place. On Twitter, it has 32,500 followers. And the most impressive of all, of the top 15 most, and Stack Overflow, 60,000 questions. On Packages, of the top 15 most popular packages on Packagist, 7 of them are by Symfony. A successful community doesn't have to be perfect. If you want an example of that, think of the amazing things coming out of the YouTube community compared to the comments left under videos. I'm happy to report that Symfony leans towards the better end of that scale. It's a positive and professional community full of passionate people who actually care. Symfony is a healthy community, it's led by example, and it's moderated appropriately. Nothing demonstrates that more than the recent efforts with the code of conduct and the care team. It shows that the Symfony leaders are putting people before code. They're putting human beings first. I'd like you all to think quickly about whether or not you contribute to Symfony or get involved in its community. Contributing to Symfony means contributing to the success of the framework and following the philosophy. If you improve the experiences of PHP developers, you promote the Symfony philosophy, whether you use the components or not. I want you to realize that being here in this room at this event means that you are contributing to Symfony, even if you don't think you are. Contributing is not some binary identity. It's not a label that gets assigned or unassigned, regardless of how that label gets used as a badge of honor sometimes. Contributing is a behavior, it's a process, it's a mindset. Obviously, when I say contributing to Symfony, the first thing most people think of is submitting a pull request. They're an easy place to start, and all of them are welcome, no matter how small they are. If you don't think you're good enough, submit it anyway. The first thing I contributed to Symfony was deleting someone else's code. The last one I did, which was about a couple of months ago, fixing someone else's typo. Nothing is too small. Use the help wanted label if you want to get into pull requests. There are many of them, hopefully, if people haven't already taken them, that are the easy ones to just pick up and get started with. It's almost October, which means Oktoberfest is going to come up. It's a month-long celebration of open source and a great initiative to get yourself or other people you know into making pull requests. As this is a conference and I'm speaking to you, obviously the next thing is giving a talk, whether it's at a conference like this, at your local user group, my local is PHP Southwest, or even if you're just leading an informal discussion with your teammates. Presenting and communicating ideas about Symfony benefits the community in one way or another, even if you're just furthering knowledge from one person to another. 16 weeks ago, I saw Thijs give his closing keynote about opportunity at Dutch PHP conference. 4 months later, I'm up here talking to you. Those have been the most terrifying 4 months of my life, and I have no public speaking experience whatsoever. But I had an idea, and I wanted to give it. So the Symfony conference organizers decided to make the effort to promote first-time speakers, and they introduced the Speakers Mentorship Program as part of its wider diversity initiative. The diversity initiative is a great way of giving access and representation to those who would otherwise be overlooked. It brings new ideas, fresh outlooks from all walks of life, which is key if we want to see the organic growth of the Symfony framework, its ecosystem, and its community. But enough with the obvious. I want to give some examples of people in the community that have made a difference without touching a line of code or speaking at conferences. Ryan is a contributor to the documentation. He started the Developer Experience Initiative, and his work has directly impacted how people interact and perceive the framework. Not many of you will know Javier by name, especially by face, but he has made blog posts for the last 11 years, every single week, called A Week in Symfony. Not only curating what's happening in the community, but also promoting the content of other community members. As the event and marketing manager, Anso has been behind every single Symfony event that I've been to, making sure everything runs smoothly. And more recently, Emily, which I've got to know as well. There are hundreds of other people which I would love to give a mention to, but I don't have the real space on the screen, and I don't want to click through every single one. But it means that there are so many different ways that you can get involved without talking if you don't like public speaking, or if you're not confident enough to make a new pull request. There are loads of things you can do. Whilst on the subject of A Week in Symfony, it's a great place to start if you want to contribute. Simply knowing what's happening in the community automatically makes it so much easier to do something. Additionally, the call to action part on every single of his posts is going to get an interactive upgrade, apparently. So it's definitely something to watch out for. Right, let's start off with something completely out of the box. If you want to contribute to Symfony, how about writing some unit tests for PHP? Symfony is built upon PHP and relies on it, which has its own bugs and unit tests. A lot of people think the internals are scary and full of dragons, and it doesn't get the love it deserves. Creating PHP unit tests is about as easy as writing unit tests for the applications we already create. So you can create one in 4 easy steps. Step 1, decide what to test. Step 2, write some PHP code. Step 3, whatever you expect to come out, then make the pull request. It's that easy. Some people only focus on improving code, making pull requests, and that's not a bad thing if you really enjoy doing that. But if you want to improve the community and the ecosystem surrounding the code, focus on people. Back to the pillars of community and contribution and communication. If you want to contribute to the community, the most important is going to be communication. More specifically, for a community such as ours that spans international borders, I'm talking about translations. If you only speak English, you can still be a translator. Some of the best contributors to the Symfony community are those that provide good communication and inclusive language. Members thrive when they feel like they are being involved, they're being included, and they are positively noticed. Whilst this conference is in England and we're speaking English, it's not the same everywhere. Every other SymfonyLive conference is going to be in a different language, and Sensio Labs, which is the main driving force behind Symfony, their native language is French. A few years ago, the translations for the documentations were discontinued because it was just infeasible to continue them. But that hasn't stopped the diversity of language amongst its members. You don't have to know a second language to help with translations. If you see someone struggling because they're not fluent in English, help them just articulate a point or idea, and that's translating. Going on to inclusive language. Instead of, you're not making any sense, try something like, I don't quite understand. I think you mean ACL. If so, try voters. Let me know if I've misunderstood you. Instead of saying, you're using this component wrong, try something like, I think what you're looking for is in the bundle rather than the component. Here's a link for more information. It's little changes in speech that take the tone of the conversation away from accusational to constructive. I don't think anyone here would ever do that on purpose or that you're lacking manners, but it really makes a difference to people that are still learning PHP, people that are still getting to grips with the framework. It makes a difference to people who don't know the terminology from a formal computer science education, like myself. It makes a difference to people who can't afford to go to conferences or work that can't afford to send them on formal training. And it absolutely makes a difference to all those people that are learning an entirely new spoken language just so they can get to a point where they can simply interact with our community. Another way to contribute is reviewing. I opened a pull request, a single line pull request back at the beginning of May, and it's still waiting to be merged, which is completely fine when you realize there are over 2,500 pull requests and 1,500 issues created just this year. Well, when I made these slides, it's probably above that now. But there's only 19 people on the core team who have merge rights, and it makes you wonder how they cope. You can make the reviewer's job a little bit easier by getting involved in the process. There is an entire article in the Symfony documentation called Community Reviews that helps you get started if you want to. Just one level up is an entire section of how to get involved with the community. Going back to people over code, there are always going to be people who contribute code or who always make pull requests. But that's completely useless if no one uses that code. If you want to make an impact, improve the community and make sure Symfony keeps going. Giving means to give without expectation, to give based on someone else's needs without assuming something will come back to you in return. At the end of the day, the absolute worst case scenario is that you have made a positive impact on somebody through your actions. And as a human, that should just make you feel good. If you can give without expectation, you've got everything to gain. That's a brilliant mindset to have, especially for the open source community. But that only applies to your expectations. That doesn't mean you should never get anything back in return from the framework, from the community. I wouldn't expect anyone here to remain in a community if it was never beneficial or advantageous to you in some way. Connecting with people Provide something they're interested in and give them a reason to show it to others. Human connection, the desire to see and be seen, that's what powers involvement in communities. It's completely okay to want recognitions for the things you do and the things you contribute. It's okay to be selfish once in a while. Asking for help on Stack Overflow is arguably classified as a selfish action, but your actions will benefit any developer that has the same question and goes searching for it in the future. Contributing, whether to PHP, Symfony, or any other project you're involved in, is an investment in your own personal development. You're open sourcing your learning process by leveraging the power of the community for feedback and other response. Your involvement in the community has long-term benefits. Obviously, it gave me this slot as a keynote. It got me to practice at my local PHP users group for completely free. And it allowed me to ask other members of the community for their input, feedback, reviews, and quite a lot of quotes, which I stole. Giving this talk will most likely benefit me for a long time to come, obviously in maybe better job prospects, but it's also helped me with public speaking or confidence and many other ways. The open source community is a global one, so getting involved in one place, like London, will probably have ramifications in places that you wouldn't even expect across the world. So contribute as much as you can. No, contribute as much as is healthy. But community is a two-way street, and you deserve just as much back as you put in. As a minor but important note, I personally recommend everyone check out Open Sourcing Mental Illness. And I recommend that you pass that recommendation on to anyone that will listen. It could be the most important thing you tell someone without you even realizing. Talking about contributing to open source software, I have to bring up imposter syndrome. It's possibly too common and widespread to be called a syndrome. Anyone and everyone can have it. I have imposter syndrome. The founder of GopherCon Europe has spoken about having imposter syndrome. Stephen Fry dedicated several pages in his autobiography about having imposter syndrome. Closer to our industry, I want to share a piece of conversation I had when I was writing this talk. I can guarantee that not everyone in this room will have contributed to open source software. I know this, I haven't, and I'll be there. That conversation was with Dave Lidman, co-organizer of PHP Southwest, organizer of Bristol PHP training. Arguably, he has contributed more to the open source community through volunteer work and the passing on of knowledge than a couple of pull requests ever would. And that's on top of the code he writes as a developer. Many people, including prominent figures, dismiss their indirect contributions they make to the open source community just because they don't give lines of code to software projects. As developers and project people, we know that hard-to-measure metrics are just as important as the easily identifiable ones, but we completely ignore that advice when it comes to ourselves. It's okay to get things wrong. It's okay to ask for help, and most importantly, it's okay to say, I can't do this. It's okay to leave the community at any time for any reason. Despite our best efforts to not spread ourselves too thin, burnout is a thing that is prevalent in our industry, and it happens more than once in our career. Circumstances and situations beyond our control are just a fact of life. They happen, and especially as human beings enter different stages of life. Even if you're lucky to avoid all of that, your interests can change. You can simply get bored. Saying this isn't for me anymore, so I'm out, does not negate you as a person. It does not negate your contributions, and it does not negate your past involvement. It doesn't mean you can't come back at any point, at any time. And I keep forgetting to click, sorry. Your health as an individual is more important than the community, other people's expectations, or open source software. Your health is more important. Always remember that. So, exploring. Most communities you're involved in, on a happier note, sorry, that got a bit dark, Most communities you're involved in will interlink to some degree, whether you're reusing past learned skills, leaning on experience, or just basic people skills that you improve throughout your life. Once you've found a community or a space that you're comfortable with, use that as a platform to branch out and expand your horizons. As a regular visitor to Vancouver, I've tried many times to coincide my trips with Vancouver PHP. Providing I don't mess up this time, I'm going to be going to my first PHP user group on another continent. Back home, my local user group, we quite regularly do talks that have nothing to do with PHP. There have been talks on Golang, bad web design, there have been horror stories, and I think one of them was poetry at the Christmas Lightning talks. And they're great. As you grow and evolve as a person, the communities you are involved in should grow and evolve with you. Don't be afraid to find new communities that you want to, or lose touch with old communities if that's the right path for you. So, the contents of my slides aren't the focus of this talk. It's the people that came here today. It's you. Each and every one of you are already participating community members just by turning up. If you leave this room remembering just one thing, I want it to be the following reassurance. If you show genuine interest, the capacity to learn, the willingness to contribute constructively, then the Symfony community will be there for you, and with this community at your back, you can make a difference. You are what makes Symfony a community greater than the sum of its code base. And that was... Why am I clapping? Thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful time at the social. And I don't know if you ask questions after a keynote. I've never done this before. Are there any questions? No. Okay. Thank you.